I want to touch briefly on 5 different attack vectors that enable a session hijacking attack to take place. We'll look at these in more detail as the course progresses, but let me just quickly cover them here to set some context as well. So one attack vector is your classic man-in-the-middle attack. So this is where an attacker can get into the communications between a victim and a target server. So for example, over a rogue Wi-Fi hotspot, or by implementing DNS spoofing, say on the router that the victim is connecting through. Man-in-the-middle attacks are a vector that lead to all sorts of different risks when we have machines communicating between each other on a network. The other one to be conscious of is a man in the browser. So now we're talking about where there might be malware or Trojans installed on a machine. Perhaps even a malicious browser add-on, so something that can execute on the host in the browser. That puts the victim at risk of session hijacking, but it also puts them at risk of a bunch of other stuff once an attacker is actually running software on the target's machine. So a man in the browser attack is pretty malicious, and session hijacking is just one of the things that can happen as a result. Another attack vector is brute forcing. So the classic style of attack where an attacker is just simply trying to force their way into a system. And in the case of session hijacking, that might mean enumerating through session IDs until they can find a valid one. That's one of the attacks that we're going to look at in more detail over the coming modules. Another classic web attack that can lead to session hijacking is cross-site scripting. And this is a topic that I cover in depth in a bunch of my other Pluralsight courses as well. So for example, my Hack Yourself First course goes into a lot of detail on cross-site scripting. Now the relevance here is that a cross-site scripting attack can then be used to mount a session hijacking attack. So one thing sort of leads to the other. And you might execute a cross-site scripting attack via a little bit of social engineering. So for example, an attacker distributing a malicious link via email and convincing the targets that they need to click on that link, which can then potentially lead into a session hijacking attack. That's another one that we're going to spend quite a bit of time on in this course. And finally, session ID leakage. So when the session ID can actually be obtained by the attacker from some other source on the web. We'll talk about the referrer in outbound links. So when a user clicks on a link, is their session ID possibly sent to another site in the referrer header? And we'll also take a look at where session IDs get exposed in log files. And that is something which unfortunately is alarmingly common. And it does lead to a potential session hijacking attack. So you can see here that we do have multiple attack vectors. And you might have initially thought of session hijacking as being a pretty simple thing, but there are a lot of different angles to it. There's a lot of different ways an attacker can actually mount this session hijacking attack. But what does it actually mean if the attack is successful? What's the impact? Let's go and take a look at that now, because it's really important to understand just how badly things can go wrong in a successful session hijacking attack.